Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, Wooden Railway Adventures, Episode 174, Henry's Handcar Havoc. "That's the last of 'em, me hearty," chuckled Salty. "Your train be ready to go." Henry smiled. "There's something special about pulling the flying kipper," he said quietly. "I guess it makes me feel important." "Well, don't let it go to your funnel," laughed James. "Every time you're in charge of something important, you always seem to mess it up." Henry became cross. "Like what?" he asked quickly. "You were supposed to pull the Queen's train, remember? And instead decided your boiler needed a fresh coat of white paint," said James cheekily. "Not to mention every time you pull the flying kipper, you always seem to find a way to leave the rails in dramatic fashion." Henry snorted. "For being the size of Edward, you certainly have an ego that could rival Gordon," he mumbled quietly. Just then, Ryan pulled in with the mail coaches. The engines immediately fell silent. "What's going on here?" he asked cheerfully. "Oh, the flying kipper. You better be careful, Henry." James rolled his eyes. "Would you stop with the jokes?" he asked crossly. "And how many times have you pulled such an important train as this?" asked Henry. Ryan's smile disappeared. "Oh, sorry," he said quietly. "I guess I should be going." "Yes, you should. And Percy wants his mail cars back," laughed James. "Don't listen to them, sailor," said Salty. "A moment ago, they be laughing about like a pirate who just discovered his long-lost treasure chest. They'll warm up to you soon." "Thanks, Salty," murmured Ryan. "Hopefully sooner better than later." Eventually, the guard's whistle blew and Henry pulled away with his long train. He barely made it out of the docks when he was forced to stop due to some unsafe track conditions. "The track here is warped due to the high water and you're too heavy, Henry," said his driver. "Looks like James will have to take the kipper this time." Henry was very cross at having to give up his favorite train. It was even more embarrassing when he saw Ryan at the turntable the next day. "You know, Henry," he said, smiling, "we've both successfully pulled the flying kipper the same amount of times in the last week." Henry pretended he hadn't heard. "You're so fat they might as well have a handcar head the train," continued Ryan. "At least then the flying kipper would be able to leave the docks next time." Henry felt insulted even though Ryan was only joking. Bill and Ben laughed and laughed. "You wait and see," said Henry. "I'll prove Ryan wrong and then you two will be laughing at that instead." But Bill and Ben weren't convinced. "That tank engine sure showed you," chuckled Ben. The next day, Henry was waiting in the yard when Ryan arrived to pull Percy's train. There, sitting on the line, was a handcar. "All right, Ryan, since you think this is more valuable to this railway than I am, let's see how well it pulls the mail. Go ahead, Mr. Handcar, take Ryan's train and be off already." Ryan chuckled. "I was only joking, Henry, but you're a strange one all the same. How long did they leave you locked up in that tunnel again?" Stafford and Murdoch burst out laughing. Henry was so cross that he angrily bashed into the handcar. It went sailing down the rails and out of sight. "Uh-oh," murmured Murdoch. "You better go catch that," agreed Stafford. "That's the last thing the railway inspector needs to see. A runaway handcar on the main line." Henry realized he had made a big mistake. He immediately left the station in pursuit of the handcar. Further down the line, he stopped next to Neville, Molly, and Dennis. "Why are you out of breath?" asked Molly. "Did you see a handcar pass by here?" asked Henry quickly. "We did," said Dennis, "but I thought I was seeing things." "Me too," agreed Neville. "You don't normally see a handcar traveling down the rails with nobody aboard. It's going to be hard to stop now." Henry sighed. "How do you stop a runaway handcar?" he asked sadly. "I suppose you'll have to outrun it," said Dennis. "But I don't have any idea where it's gone," he insisted. "Maybe you'll get lucky and it will stop on a hill," said Molly optimistically. But Henry wasn't listening. He knew he had a long day ahead of him trying to catch an elusive handcar. Back at the station, Ryan was preparing to leave with his train when James rolled in. "Can you take my passengers?" he asked Edward. "I'm pulling the flying kipper again." "Really?" said Edward. "That's surprising. Usually Henry doesn't pass up the opportunity to pull the kipper, especially since the line has been rerouted to avoid the coastal track." "He can't pull it today," continued James. "Apparently he is still chasing a handcar around the island he bumped this morning. How silly of him." Ryan was surprised to hear that Henry still hadn't stopped the handcar. "Poor fellow," he murmured as he pulled away with the mail. On the other side of the island, Henry had given up. He rolled slowly into Great Waterton where Diesel was resting. "What are you doing up here in the hills?" asked Henry. "The more appropriate question is, what are you doing here?" chuckled Diesel. "Still in search of your friend, the handcar?" "You've heard about it too?" asked Henry sadly. "Oh, everyone's heard about it," smiled Diesel. "It will only be a matter of time before the railway inspector finds out as well. This will not look good on his report, either." "You have to help me, Diesel," begged Henry. "You're not hiding it somewhere, are you?" "Oh, I haven't the slightest clue," chuckled Diesel. "You're in trouble and I haven't done a thing." Henry was at a loss at what to do. Sir Topham Hatt will surely send me back to the tunnel, he thought sadly. Suddenly, he found Ryan at the entrance to Elsbridge Station. "I heard you're still looking for the handcar," he said quietly. "I think it fell off the viaduct, and it's in the diesel works over there." Henry looked over and saw the handcar off to the side of the turntable. Although it was damaged from the fall, it wasn't running around wildly on the rails anymore. "Wow, thank you, Ryan," said Henry. "But why would you help me? Especially after I've treated you so poorly. We've all treated you poorly." "Well, I saw a friend in need and I couldn't sit idly by and not help," smiled Ryan. "A poor review by the railway inspector is worse than a grudge between two engines." Henry smiled at Ryan's comment. "You're quite the wise tank engine," he said happily. "I appreciate your help, and the next time I need some assistance getting up Gordon's Hill, I'll be sure to call on you to be my back engine." "That might not be a good combination," said Ryan. "Two of the most accident-prone engines working on the same train? That could mean disaster." Just then the railway inspector walked by. "Lousy Oafstead project," he murmured. "Oh, hello there. What are you two doing standing about? Is that a handcar on its side over there?" "It nearly landed on me," shouted Norman from afar. "Oh, I'm not in the mood," grunted the inspector, "but I'm sure you two have something to do with it." And he walked away. Ryan and Henry couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, everything's back to normal," said Henry. "The inspector's still grumpy, he's blaming steam engines for all of the problems, and the rails are free from the Handcar Havoc," said Ryan happily. And the two friends puffed away, glad to put the day's events behind them.